it really is a wonderful thing to be in the presence of God. And I'm thankful that the Lord gives us the opportunity to see him in the light that he expresses and the way that he expresses himself. And going through the Bible, I've said this on several occasions that personally, I just look at the Bible as there's an Old Testament and there's a New Testament. But in the middle there, the four Gospels, I don't really allocate them as part of either or, but rather that was what the Old and the New Testament sees as its focal point, the life of Christ and how it's depicted through these Gospels. And so I just thought, because this is something that this is a topic I really enjoy. So if some of you have heard me do this topic before, please bear with me. But this is something that quite excites me. And where I'm going to start is in a very, very strange place. But this is because Ryan, going through the breakdown of the book of Romans, we went through Romans 1 and we see how it's speaking about, obviously the analogy of the complete unbeliever. But it also gives allocation in there saying that for those who were without the word, they are not left unaccountable, because they would have seen creation and known that there is a creator. And even for those who keep studying and studying and studying God's creation, even then you would see the wonderful essence of God, the if I can say, the story that God has written. Now, in Romans 1, it talks about the sky, it talks about the heavens and how you can see through the sun that there is one creator and one giver of life. But even here, I'm going to delve into something that I also enjoy, biology. I really enjoy biology. And you can see even here, there is something that is put in the hearts of men. And more than just, the emotions that are there, but rather also from a biological point of view, the story that God has written. Now, the heart itself is broken up into 4 chambers. We have the left atrium and the left ventricle, as well as the right atrium and the right ventricle. So the division in the half, there's one half that deals with the blood that has no oxygen in it, and then one half of the heart that has lots of oxygen in it. But now it needs to add that oxygen somewhere. So what the heart does is it takes the blood from the rest of the body, it puts it in the one side, so it puts it in the right atrium, and that blood with no oxygen in it gets pumped into the right ventricle. And the right ventricle will then send the blood to the lungs so that it can attach some oxygen on there. Once it comes back from the lungs, it goes into the left atrium. And the left atrium pumps the blood then into the left ventricle. And now this blood that has lots of oxygen gets dispersed from the left ventricle throughout the entire body. And that's how our blood processes oxygen. So every time you take a breath, this is the process that's happening. And that is an amazing thing. And just one of the things that I want to put in here, Leviticus chapter 17, verse 11, it says, "For the life of the flesh is in the blood. And I have given it to you upon the altar to make an atonement for your souls. For it is the blood that maketh an atonement for the soul." So beautifully written in the law, from a physical aspect, it's written here, for the life of the flesh is in the blood. But how much better for us? Because in the spirit, the life of us is in the blood of Christ, and that is an amazing thing. Now let's have a look why the heart is broken down into these 4 areas, if I can say that, right? And let's just look at a depiction of what happens when someone goes to heaven. So we see the first account that we're going to look at, and I am going to quickly go through these and not necessarily break them down into the differences that we see between the 2 accounts here. But I'm just going to go through a New Testament account and an Old Testament account. And the reason why the accounts look slightly different is because of the fulfillment of Christ. So one was prior to Christ being on earth, and one was post Christ being on earth. So the Messiah then, pre and post his coming. And that's why we'll see there's a bit of a difference in the way that it's depicted by the 2 people. But what they saw was the same thing when they looked into heaven. So first we're going to go through Revelation chapter 4. And verse 1, it says, "And after this I looked," so just for you to note, "after this I looked, and behold, a door was open in heaven. And the first voice which I heard was as it were of a trumpet talking with me, which said, 'Come up hither, and I will show thee things which must be hereafter.'" So I just want to take that verse. This is not in accordance to this study particularly, but it is an important verse, because what you will see from a chronological point of view is you have chapter 2 and 3 of Revelation, which talks of the 7 church ages, broken down into the 7 churches of Asia Minor. And immediately once those 7 churches are complete, it says, "Come up hither." So this we would refer to as the catching away. And that will be a different study that we talk about at some point. But I just want to put this here into perspective, right? So John gets taken up into heaven, and he says, verse 2, "And immediately I was in the Spirit, and behold, a throne was set in heaven, and one sat on the throne." Beautiful how Brother Jeffrey is going through baptism and through its multiple components. And one of the things that you can see that is resonated on over and over and over again is that there was one throne set in heaven and one that sat upon that throne. We skip across to verse 6. It says, "And before the throne there was set a sea of glass like unto crystal. And in the midst of the throne and round about the throne were 4 beasts full of eyes before and behind. And the first beast was like a lion, and the second beast like a calf, and the third beast had a face as a man, and the fourth beast was like a flying eagle." Again, I just want you to note that the cross-reference that we have, that we're going to read through in Ezekiel, is different. And like I had said, this is because of the 2 different views of the Messiah. Okay, so now we turn to Ezekiel chapter 1. Ezekiel chapter 1. And from verse 1 it says, "Now it came to pass in the 13th year, in the 4th month, in the 5th day of that month, as I was among the captives by the river of Chebar, that the heavens were opened, and I saw visions of God." So clearly, both these accounts was a clear view of what's happening in heaven. We skip across to verse 4. It says, "And behold, and I looked, and behold, a whirlwind came out of the north, and a great cloud, and a fire enfolding itself, and the brightness was about it, and out of the midst thereof, as the color of amber, out of the midst of the fire." So just a reference that I want to put there as well. If you'll go through a lot of the teachings that Brother Branham does, he makes mention that the color of God is the color of amber, right? And it's a beautiful color. But here again, we can see that Ezekiel is having these visions of God, and he sees that in the midst of this is the color of amber. Okay, verse 5, it says, Also, out of the midst thereof came the likeness of 4 living creatures, and this was their appearance. They had the likeness of a man. And every one had 4 faces, and every one had 4 wings, and their feet were straight feet, and the soles of their feet was like the sole of a calf's foot, and they sparkled like the color of burnished brass. And they had the hands of a man under their wings on the 4 sides, and they 4 had the faces and their wings. And their wings were joined one to another, and they turned not where they went. They went every one straight forward. As for the likeness of their faces, they 4 had the face of a man and the face of a lion on the right side. And they 4 had the face of an ox on the left side. They 4 also had the face of an eagle. So this is not the full description of these 4 beasts. It does continue in Ezekiel chapter 1, but I do want to talk about these 4 appearances. In particular, that's why I didn't put the full description. But I would encourage you, please go and read Ezekiel chapter 1. Right. Now, the interesting thing that's happening here is that if we'd like to call these maybe bodyguards around the throne of God, because we see these beasts, and if you read Ezekiel chapter 1, you will see that they almost have the purpose to ensure, if I can say, the safety of the throne. But this seems really stupid, because God is God. Who can hurt God? Unless God ordains it, who can hurt God? So these are not necessarily bodyguards, but rather, if we change our opinion about these 4 beasts around the throne and how they protect God, let's rather look at it as these 4 are the way God is depicted to us. So when we are reading to God, or when we are reading about God, and what we are trying to study when we go through these Gospels, we're trying to understand God. But how can we possibly understand God? We cannot understand the fullness of God. There is no possible way. For all eternity that we may live, we will never understand that. But God allows himself to be depicted through these 4 characteristics and through multiple other characteristics, right? So God depicts himself as the Lion of Judah, as well as the Lamb. God depicts himself as the Father, as well as the Son. God depicts himself in many forms, right? He even depicts himself as the judge, as well as if I can say, the defense lawyer or the defense attorney that will come to our aid when it comes to judgment time. So in many times, we see that there's a paradox to the way God describes himself, but it is because that when we read it, we will understand an element of God. So let's go through these 4 attributes that is being depicted. Now, as an interesting thing, these elements are depicted by the writers of these Gospels in a specific way. When Matthew writes, I don't think Matthew was necessarily understanding the way that he wrote the Gospel, his Gospel. But it was by the divine inspiration of God that his intellect made him write the Gospel in this specific way. And it was to show God as this lion, this king of the beasts, an animal that is revered by all other animals. Right? So when Matthew writes about it, he writes about God in this kingly fashion. We will see that in Matthew chapter 1 and verse 1, it talks about, this is the book of the generation of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Till now, Israel sees David as the greatest king that has ever lived, or that has ever, well, yes, that has ever lived, but as well as that has ever ruled over Israel and the Jewish nation. Now, he was not the first king over Israel, nor was he the richest, because we'll see, you see his son Solomon, he had the largest kingdom from Israel. His kingdom spanned across from India all the way to Ethiopia. He was the richest king. And yet, still, till now, David is the one that is revered as the best king and the greatest king over Israel. More so, we'll see that, or we see that it then talks about the son of Abraham. Now, obviously, we know from a genealogical point of view, right? David was not the direct son of Abraham, but he was part of that genealogy. Why then mention Abraham? Even though Abraham was not a king himself, Abraham was revered as this king because he had such a strong worth. And you will even see that at one point when Lot gets captured during a war, Abraham goes with his house servants, if I can say it that way, with his house servants. He makes them take the gardening tools and all of that, and he goes and he destroys those kingdoms, those 5 kings, and he sets his nephew free. Also, we see that when that interaction happens, Melchizedek, the king of peace, comes to meet and comes to commune with Abraham. It's an amazing, amazing thing. One of the other interesting things that you will see throughout the Gospel of Matthew, and one of the things that I'm highlighting here, is in Matthew chapter 2, from verse 1 to 16, I will read only verse 11 here. It says, "And when they were come into the house, they saw the young child with Mary his mother, and fell down and worshipped him. And when they had opened their treasures, they presented unto him gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh." Now, this is the only gospel talking about or documenting the visit of the Magi when Christ was born, declaring that Christ was born King of the Jews. Now we move on to the next. We see that Mark, the book of Mark, when it starts off, it says, "In the beginning was the gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God." Great stuff. But it doesn't give any genealogy. Why? Because an ox or a calf is a worker animal. No one cares about the genealogy of an ox or a calf. What you need to know is that it can do the work. It can function as a hard worker. And when an ox cannot work anymore, it is then sent to an abattoir so that it can make again provisions, even in its death, and again still serving as meat to them, right? So we see from in Mark chapter 1, from verse 14, God is already working. It says, "Now after that John was put in prison, Jesus came into Galilee preaching the gospel of the kingdom of God." What's the purpose of a servant, right? I take myself as an employee of the company. The company doesn't care what's going on when I come home. What they need to know is, once I get into work, am I working? Am I doing what's productive for the company, right? The same way, God is put to work as a calf. Chapter 16, from verse 1 to 20, you will see how even the way that Jesus commissions his disciples, he commissions them to do the work in this fashion. And I'm going to read verse 20. It says, "And they went forth and preached everywhere, the Lord working with them and confirming the word with signs following." Amen. Then we move on to the next beast, which is Luke. The Gospel of Luke depicts Christ as this very intellectual man. Now, Luke was by profession a doctor. also one of the only Gentile to have written the gospel, any gospel, right? He was an intellectual person, and the way that he saw God. Sorry for my English. The way that he saw God was in this very intellectual way. So, firstly, when we think from a human perspective, from a humanoid perspective, we want to know about not just the genealogy of someone, but we want to know about their pregnancies. We want to know whether the mother is doing well, whether, how the child is developing. Is the mother eating right? What cravings does she have? The same way, when Luke depicts, or when Luke is writing, you'll see that in chapter 1, he talks about this encounter and the two pregnancies of Mary and Elizabeth, right? Chapter 1, verse 41, it says, "And it came to pass that when Elizabeth heard the salutation of Mary, the babe leapt within her womb, and Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Ghost." Then we see the dedication of this child, Jesus Christ. So again, something that we find important. You must dedicate your children, right? So chapter 2, verse 24, it says, "And to offer the sacrifice according to that which is said in the law of the Lord, a pair of turtle doves and 2 young pigeons." This was the dedication of Christ according to the law of Moses. His parents were doing what was appropriate and what was according to the law, right? And then when we see the genealogy that's written, it takes it back all the way to Adam, the first man. Chapter 3, from verse 23 to 38, and I'm only going to read verse 38. It says, which was the son of Enoch, which was the son of Seth, which was the son of Adam, which was the son of God. Right? So it even takes it back to God being, if I can say, the first man, but he created man. And Adam was seen as the son of God. Right? And then we see in chapter 24, in verse 13, it says, "And behold, 2 of them," this is the 2 men that was on the road to Emmaus. "And after the crucifixion, Christ came and he walked with them, and he was explaining things to them." And it says, "And behold, the 2 of them went that same day to a village called Emmaus, which was from Jerusalem about 3 furlongs." And if you read that encounter, you will see that after the resurrection, Jesus had to give an assurity to the people. He had to calm their anxiety. Like the people we always want someone to come and baby us a little bit and tell us everything is going to be okay. So even here, Jesus came and he's telling them, don't worry, And then they were explaining to him, but you see, so Jesus had to explain to them with the intellect, with tying everything back to the law and the prophets and everything that was written. He had to expound on how the Messiah was fulfilled. And the moment they realized that Christ was the Messiah, he got teleported from their space. So even here, you can see that Jesus, the way that Luke depicts Christ is through the form of man. And then it comes to the craziest one, which is the Gospel of John. John he writes on a different level. He writes this depiction of Christ. He starts off in chapter 1 and verse 1, it says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." Immediately, this gospel starts off with the spiritual insight that's required. It's amazing. And it's not to say that you can't read the book of John or the Gospel of John without spiritual insight. But a lot of what's going on won't make sense because he doesn't write the same way as the other 3. Right? We see that the Gospel of John doesn't have any parables about the kingdom of God, but rather gives spiritual applications of who Christ is. We see the miracle of Jesus turning water to wine. This was the first miracle that Jesus performed at the wedding feast in Cana. This is recorded in this gospel because it is a representation of turning doctrine to the stimulation of revelation. That is why it is depicted here. There was something important that was happening there. There was a spiritual insight that was happening in that miracle. We also see that, and Ryan does a beautiful study on this, that there are 7 miracles which are accounted for in this book. And this is relative to the 7 Gentile churches. It is a beautiful book that has a deep spiritual insight. The same way, when we are looking at God, if you want to see him on that deep spiritual insight, there is a way to see him, this flying eagle. An eagle that soars above most other birds, and yet still has vision for the smallest prey. It's an amazing thing to watch an eagle hunt, to see how high it can fly, and yet still it can see a rabbit. It can see that movement, and it can with pinpoint precision fly down and catch that prey. And the same way, when we are looking at Christ, depending on how we are looking at him, sometimes we need to look at him from the aspect of man. Sometimes we're struggling with things. We're struggling with trials and tribulations. And we need to understand, God, why is this happening? God gives us insight with that spirit, or if I can say, with the spiritual beast like a man. Sometimes God commissions us and he says, right, go out and do my work. And it's a tough thing. It's a tough thing to start work in the kingdom of God, because you know how much importance is placed on that. But like the ox, we are required. And what example do we follow after? We follow after the example that is Christ. You see how Christ went out and he worked. Yeah, we follow that example. And sometimes we need that surety of where we are going to and what awaits us. We hope for these things. We have hope, and hope is an important thing. And that's why sometimes God shows his authority over everything, over hell, over death, hell, and the grave. God shows his authority over that, and he is the king of all. So when we are looking at Christ, we see him through these different attributes. And even when it was in the Old Testament, even the way that the encampment was set up for the Jews, it was set in a specific way. Why? Because it was a picture of what was happening in heaven. You will see that God explains to Moses, and he says that this is a picture of what's in heaven. This is how you make it, and it was very specific. All right, I'm not going to go through the encampment of the Jews because we are running out of time. I just want to pull it back to something that, again, excites me. Our DNA. Such a small and minute thing within ourselves, and yet it makes up all of our genetic information. This is what makes every creature unique. As much as you can have, all of us that are on the call this evening are humans. So you can tell the difference in our DNA between us and other animals. But even more so, you can do DNA testing between 2 individuals. You can do testing between myself and Brother Fari, and you can see that there are very clear differences. And if you put a third DNA in there, like Ryan, who is my brother, you'll be able to see that, we are related, very closely related, but there's still a difference in the DNA. Can you imagine all of that genetic information is sitting within each one of our cells. And here's the crazy thing, right? So all of that DNA is made up of molecules that are made by 4 nucleic bases, right? So we have adenine, thymine, guanine, and cytosine. These are these base pairs. And depending on how those 4 are listed, that's what makes the differences between everything, between all living beings. That's amazing to me, that only 4 things, and just how they are listed, that's what makes the differences between us. Now, these always join together, right? Adenine will always join to thymine, and guanine will always join to cytosine. But because they are joining, that means there are 2 strands. And these strands are coiled together. It's amazing. There's an Old Testament and there's a New Testament. And that is why we focus, we put a lot of focus on the Old Testament, because these join up. We understand that as a Gentile dispensation, you know, there's a lot of what's written in the New Testament that is very applicable to us. And there's always questions about why are certain things in the Old Testament no longer applicable? How are they not applicable, or do they have a deeper spiritual insight that we have to map, we have to join to what's in the New Testament? And these molecules are coiled together to create something that is tightly bound. Our faith must be tightly bound in the truth that is in God. As Christians, we are uniquely set apart from the world. We are set apart to life. And we must base all our doctrine on both the Old and the New Testament. The 4 Gospels bring the Old and the New Testaments together through seeing the life of this Messiah. All the prophecies, all the law that was written in the Old Testament was as a focal point to reach the Messiah. The New Testament is looking back at the grace of what the Messiah has done and how that is relevant, or how that is distributed, and the dispensation that came down from the book of Acts going forward, how that is relevant, how the Messiah was so relevant to us going forward. When we look at Christ, we look at him from both those perspectives of understanding. Brothers and sisters, I hope that this was a blessing to you. God bless you.